Keys to the Commonwealth, a podcast where we share the real stories of local community members who are using real estate to build personal wealth, along with tips and tricks from professionals across the industry. And now, your host, Landry Fields.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Keys to the Commonwealth podcast. It is Landry. I'm excited to be with you again today. As an insurance advisor, you know I work with real estate investors and professionals every day, and I love talking to them, getting their stories, and learning a little bit more about the ins and outs of real estate investing. Today, I'm very excited for today's guest. He is a real estate investor of 12 years and is the owner of Waller Property Management, LLC, and Genesis Holding Investments. Born and raised here in Lexington, he received his degree from Murray State, is married to his beautiful bride, Ellen, and together they have 3 kids, Caton, Finn, and Barrett. I'm pleased to welcome Clay Waller today to the Keys to the Commonwealth studio. Clay, my man, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Landry.
Well, I appreciate it. So we kind of start every episode here, kind of taking a hop back in the time machine here. Tell me, how did you get into real estate investing to begin with? Because we're relatively mid-30s, roughly the same age, and for somebody, especially for somebody having 12 years of experience already, that's kind of you don't see that a lot in the real estate investing side, I think.
Yeah, so let's go back 12 years ago. So really, let's take it back another year. My last semester in college, I came back here December of 2019, and my grandfather has been in the real estate industry for 50 years here in the central Kentucky market, had assets all over the place, and he got diagnosed with prostate cancer, stage 4, and he just came to me and says, "Hey, I really don't want to sell. It's a bad time. Will you step in and manage my assets for me?" So at that point, I was actually gearing toward being a physical education teacher. Okay. And God really softened my heart at that point. And up until that, I wanted nothing to do with my family, their assets. I kind of more of like a rebel, kind of want to go on my own path. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. So God opened that door, and I said, all right, I'll do it for a year. And so graduate school in May, and then so the middle part of May, I come into my grandfather's office, and literally he hands me a box of leases and a box of keys and says, "Here you go." And I was like, what did I walk into? So at that point, I'd been around it a little bit, but having to run a portfolio from that point with no training, no expertise, at that point, I needed some help. So I called upon 2 older guys that were in the industry, and they really helped lead me during that time and kind of steer me in that direction. And then within about the first 2 months, I said, what he has here is freedom, and I want that. So at that point, within the second month, I did my first real estate deal. And then from there, about a couple years later, started out in the single-family, multifamily realm and got to about 100 units. And then at that point, I was having trouble with just keeping employees and just keeping everything going smooth on my part as a business owner, but also managing the assets of my grandfather.
So you're still doing both at this point, kind of acquiring your own as well as managing his.
Correct. And so I was living off what I was being paid by him, and then just simply constantly reinvesting into new assets. Yeah. And I got looking and said, I was looking at his commercial portfolio, and I'm like, there's not a whole lot. Once you get the tenants in place and get the properties humming, you really you can take your foot off the gas, unlike the residential side. So then at that point, I decided, all right, I'm going to try out the commercial space. So one of my mentors was one of the leading guys in the industrial space here in Lexington, and he was telling me, he goes, "Hey, if I could redo a couple of my properties, I would do this new thing. It's called Flex." And I was like, okay, explain that to me. So he was saying that this space is very flexible for tenants, and it gives you a broader net to cast out to when you're renting to industrial tenants. And he was bragging about, hey, there's not a whole lot I have to do here. You don't get the calls at the middle of the night or saying, hey, my sink's not working, or, just the random BS things you get from the residential side. Yeah. And I was like, I'm tired of the phone calls. It's just, it's always going off.
So when we say flex, let's expand upon that, walk me through, for somebody who doesn't know, flex is more like just a commercial space building that could be used for multiple different ways or something like that, not like store facing type of scenario, or sometimes it just doesn't. Is that what it's saying?
So
depends.
yeah, so the flex that is actually used, it's industrial flex, meaning it's simply a warehouse, but it could be built out as retail, it could be built out as office, and so it could be primarily, it could be 20% office, 80% warehouse, or it could be a 50-50, or it could be 80% office, 10% warehouse. It has some type of storage or warehouse ability in that class.
Okay. And then it's just, like I said, flexible because you can just do whatever you want as far as structuring it out, portioning out, so forth.
Yeah, correct. And so all the walls are non-load bearing. It's all cosmetic. So simply you can go in and simply start taking walls out, add to it. And it gives you just a broad net. And then the price per square foot is just so attractive to a lot of people. Instead of going out and paying, $18 a square foot for a retail space, and they still need some place for storage, they can come and rent flex space for $8 to $10 a square foot.
Okay.
And then build it out, and that's a lot cheaper for them. It makes more sense, gives them flexibility as trends go and come.
And I assume, has that been a trend that is not, we're kind of skipping ahead towards today with post-COVID scenario? Has that been the trend I've heard that might be the thing that's really taken off in a lot of ways?
Yeah, so that has been, just to kind of give you an idea, that our net has broadened tremendous. We didn't see a lot of retail pre-COVID, and now post-COVID, we're seeing a lot of retail. So when we were in lockdown, I had 4 tenants at a complex that we have that ended up, they said, hey, COVID's kind of death knell to our business. We're gonna go ahead and give you notice to leave. And at that point, we had 4 units, and within 5 days, I had 6 tenants ready to fill those spaces at probably the worst point during this pandemic. And they were anywhere from retail. I had the University of Kentucky dive team actually looking at a place where they could practice. And I was just like, wow, this is so just huge.
Yeah.
And actually, we had a gym that was interested in renting off of us just because they were looking at numbers.
Yeah.
And, kind of the warehouse industry now has kind of became a little more sexier than it was a couple years ago.
Is that, again, like you said, from the flexible side, it's just like it doesn't matter really what the market is looking like. It's almost, there's like a demand probably from somebody in some capacity, I guess, is what we're getting at there.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice hedge against, obviously retail, probably took a big hit kind of during COVID, as a lot of people weren't able to either go into retail stores, little mom and pop stores, or some of the restaurant stuff on that side of things. And so, yeah, I can see why is the industry in Kentucky on the new build, I assume, exploded as well. Has it been harder to kind of acquire that as far as an investor, I would assume?
Yeah, so Lexington has not had a whole lot of inventory. You would say in the last probably 10 years, we have had majority of our flex spaces came online through new construction.
Yeah.
We have had some older flex spaces, but they've had 2 problems. A, it's been in a terrible neighborhood, or B, there's no parking. So what has happened now in the last 10 years is you've had developers see this need, and they have came to meet the need of the tenants in these areas. And so, really, through COVID, there's been a 50,000 square foot development that is just completed. I'm getting word that there's another one, and then I'm partnering with Ed Richardson with the Gibson Company. Mm-hmm. And me and him have a 30,000 square foot development that we have plans with the city right now. Okay. And we're just waiting for them to get all our sign off so we can start pushing dirt and move forward. So
exciting times there. I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms as far as one day, I'd love to explore with somebody as far as because obviously commercial changes things. There's a lot more with city planning, a lot more with zoning and some of those things than existing. Here's like a single family home or a duplex or quadplex. It obviously, it gets a lot more murky and messy for sure.
Yeah. It's, instead of, if you got a lot, you can just go to the city and within, a day or 2, you have your permit, you're ready to go. Unlike a complete, commercial development, it could take years. And that's one of the reasons the cost is on there. The attorneys you hire, the engineers, architects, and just the constant of redrafting, your development plan, your site plan, and just the constant change, and really working with the city to make it where it still makes economic sense. So it takes some time, it takes capital, and it takes a lot of patience.
And per one of the things we were talking about, the importance of partnerships. You mentioned the commercial side of things. It's obviously easy to do maybe single family homes or some of these things on your own, but I guess you would assume, like you've talked about, partnerships are kind of a big key with that. Maybe either a partner or the partnerships you make with the people. Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So kind of a couple years ago, I was not real big on partnerships, but actually getting into two of them now have really been beneficial, because it should be almost like a marriage. You want somebody, you want to partner with you or several people where you each have your expertise, and besides that, it's also a personality thing too. You don't want to put two alpha males right next to each other. You need two people that ultimately know, hey, partner A is better at this and partner B is better at this. Yeah. And ultimately, it works out better that way. And then also too, it gives you where not all the responsibilities on you. You can divvy up different things, and then also you can do bigger deals, because that's less capital that you will have to put into that deal. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of syndications that are really kind of becoming more the future of commercial real estate, where people are buying in and having 10 to 15% in deals instead of owning the whole deal outright or having a 50% stake in that deal.
Have you gotten any of that yourself as far as the syndication side of things?
No, but I've actually on this new deal, I've actually had several people kind of asking me to kind of syndicate that deal.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit, because because the other part as far as getting into commercial, partnership is a good way, because obviously finances can be a bigger portion, because obviously commercial is going to be a lot more expensive than, say, a residential single family house or a duplex or something like that. So getting into it without financial assets at disposal, obviously partnerships can come into a major factor there. And then the syndications, let's expand on that, is going to be more of like where there's a group side of saying investors almost like that at the same time, right?
Yeah, so the syndications, most time how that will work is, so if I wanted to syndicate a deal, what I'll do is I'll go out and raise money. I will find individuals, and it's simply like selling them stock. Sure. That they have in the business. And so some of the syndications, just depending on the plan they have, some will say, what we're going to do is we're going to take the money, we're going to get a pool of money together, we're going to go out, we're going to find these certain assets in these certain markets, and we're going to put that to work. We're going to go in. Some syndications want to go in and find like a Class C. Yeah. It could be industrial or retail, and they're going to go in, put capital in there, get the rents up, and then unload it. And then certain ones actually are more of like a buy and hold.
Buy and hold, yeah.
So it really depends on the syndication and the syndicator, and usually whoever syndicates that deal will put a percentage on there to manage it. Okay. And so usually, some cases they'll do it for, they'll get some equity in that deal for no money. It's just really putting the structure together. Sure. And
there's a lot of ways to structure those things, and hopefully one day we'll kind of talk more about that, between structuring deals, whether if you don't have finances, like maybe you're getting paid for managing it or putting together versus equity, or maybe a blend of both, like you're getting paid some to manage it as well as some of the equity. Maybe, and you didn't put anything down potentially, type of thing. So there's so many ways of structuring deals out there. There's really no limit to how you could structure a deal in some respects in that sense.
Yeah, no, you can be completely creative. I've seen just a handful of these syndications that really, I'm like, oh, that's a new way to think of. That's a new way to think on how to do that without having to put your own capital in it. Right. And, it's just really the asset and the investors you can pull together that really make the deal. And certain investors just want, they want their money back in 5 years plus a return. Sure. Or some are just looking for a long-term play. And so really, I've seen a little bit of both. I've seen it also where the syndicators are really just raising money instead of having to go to the bank and whipping out 20% for that project or that deal. Yeah. They'll syndicate that, and at the end, once they get everything humming, they will eventually refinance and buy the partners back out. So
yeah, and especially, I think it's so big in the sense that like people are. I've found having kind of
been in the industry for the very short time I've been in it, that it seems like there are adequate number of people looking to invest in this scenario. Like there's so many people that, I don't have the time to put my own sweat equity, blood equity, whatever into this, but I have finances. I want to invest. There's people looking to invest. And there's all, people like you starting out younger or me type of thing where it's like, hey, we've got time to do that. I mean, we both have 3 kids. I'm not sure how much time I actually have.
There's not a lot of time.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of people looking to invest, and so there's a lot of opportunity out there for people that might want to get into investing and finding those partnerships or syndications type of stuff, because there's plenty of people who want to invest in property one way or another.
Yeah, no, and I believe that owning property is one of the easiest and bestest ways to express freedom. That the freedom that we ultimately had, the freedom of owning property. And ultimately, through owning property, that gets you involved in your community, that gets you involved in civics, and ultimately, as a complete benefit for a society, is the more people that own their homes, the more skin they have in the game that actually keeps them on keeping their property up, and that ultimately increases all our property prices at the end of the day. And that's all we want, right? We want the property to increase. So
that's right. What were some of the first, obviously starting out acquiring property, and what was kind of the first things you learned or best things you learned as far as growing your book of business because I mean, you kind of quickly pivoted obviously to like, I'm going to make this a career. It seemed like from your story there. Obviously that's not the case for everybody, but as far as building it into an actual career, what was the kind of transition like with that?
It started out very slow, and then just really, just took off like a rocket. So, my biggest thing was to have some patience. One of the guys that really mentored me really stressed on, hey, you're going to look at probably 20, 25 deals, but probably only one of those deals you're actually going to be able to take down. And so when you're doing that, don't just get focused on, that's my deal. I'm going to do that. I'm going to close on it, and really be neutral in the whole thing. And I think that's one thing that's allowed me to, start out slow, but also accelerate and make sure I'm investing in good deals. Okay. And, we were talking kind of before the show on the relationship of bankers. Yeah. And so let me just pivot back here real quick. So one thing, when you're starting a business like this, you have to have bankers. And so you don't just need one, you need several. And you need to build a relationship with these bankers that ultimately when you call them, that they trust you, that they know, hey, Clay's not sending me some crazy deal out here, that he's underwrote it, he's put the time into it, and that this is something that's going to be worth my time to check out. Yeah. And there's been a couple times that I've built enough relationships with a couple bankers, I've called them up and says, hey, I got this deal, here's the location, these are the rents, here's the NOI, like, what do you think? Yep. What can we do? What type of rate are we looking at? And they've been able to say, okay, we can give you right around this rate. I need you to put this in. And that gives you so much flexibility to be able to execute in that, instead of trying to, you've signed the contract and then you're trying to figure the financing in on that. Mm-hmm. But having a couple bankers, because like what we've seen, a bank that I have done a lot of business with recently during COVID, they just simply stopped lending. Okay. For that time. They wanted to get their house in order in case this thing got worse before it got better. And so that kind of has taught me with that, but also with the other mentors I had. And that's the importance of having a mentor, somebody that's been in the industry for a long period of time, that they can set you, kind of give you a long historical perspective, but also say, hey, this is where I've messed up. Yeah.
Because there's not like a playbook, right? As far as real estate investing. I mean, there's kind of some things out there, but what I'm getting at is like what you said, the mentors. I think that's the same way with anything in life, right? Like having somebody that's been through it ultimately goes so much further, and being able to kind of further project us along the path we're wanting to go. Somebody that's been through it, that can encourage us through the ups and downs, give advice. It's invaluable for sure. No matter what business it is, my insurance business, now my investing business, has been the same thing. Having people that know what they're doing invest in me and been willing to take a chance on me in that sense has been awesome.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And I've always kind of told some of the younger guys that I've kind of been able to help mentor, and explain to them. And a lot of them don't know what a Rolodex is. I guess I'm still, and you probably still remember what a Rolodex is.
Yeah.
So I just tell them like, hey, have names and numbers.
Yeah.
Get to know all the bankers in town and get to know the ones and what type of deals that bank likes. And a lot of people, no one talks about this, but banks have certain assets that they like better than others. So find out who's doing what, and then start building a relationship with the brokers that are in the industry that you want. So if it's industrial or if it's multifamily, single family, get to know them and let them get to know you. And then once you build that relationship, keep your, this goes back to a biblical understanding of let your yes be yes and your no be no. Mm-hmm. And when you're straight up with people and they know, hey, you're going to be able to execute on this, then they're confident in you and they will send you some off-market deals. Because in the day, they're just trying to complete a transaction. So
that's right. At the end of the day, that is all what we're trying to do here. As far as your first one that you got there early on, what was your first deals? What did that look like? How'd you finance it?
So the first deal, this is a really creative financing that happened. So I ran across two individuals that had 26 unit, they're all duplexes, all located on the same street.
Okay.
And one of the owners was not doing his part. So simply you had one partner doing everything, the other partner literally doing nothing. And it got to the point that these two individuals couldn't even talk. And so I found out about it. So I went to them about putting this deal together. And luckily my grandfather had a relationship with one of them. So they knew my grandfather. So that kind of gave me a way in the door. And ultimately they had a loan at First Federal Bank here in Lexington. The bank has now changed hands. Now it's West Banco.
Yeah.
And so they had a $200,000 mortgage. I took over. I assumed that mortgage. So what it means is that everything stayed the same. They just went off the mortgage. I went on the mortgage as the guarantor of that debt. And then I paid them for 10 years, $33,000, payable in one installment each year on June 1.
So hold on. So talk about assuming the debt there. So obviously the bank has to approve that, right? So it's like selling it without really changing anything other than who, like you said, is the debtor who's levied against there.
Yeah, correct. So so a lot of banks. So let's paint the picture of that time. That it was really a unique situation. So at the time, I'm 22 years old.
Right.
And a bank lending any type of money to a 22-year-old without any experience, without anything.
Yeah.
Today, you might not be able to do that. So, but
I'm still asking the question: how did you get them to convince them to do that then?
So, what I used to convince them, I actually went to the vice president of that bank and told him, I said, "Hey, you have a problem. I got a solution." And so I said, you have a person that has signed a mortgage that is not technically paying on time, and the best thing you can do is have somebody else take over that debt for them.
Yeah.
And get them off of it and get somebody that will pay it on time. And I said, you can look up my credit score. I pay my bills. And
you had zero rentals at this point.
Zero rentals at the time. And I just told him, I said, I'm young.
But you've been property managing for a little bit. So correct. At least there was that. Okay.
Yeah. And so, I explained to him what I do. He knew my grandfather and knew the assets.
Okay.
And, he said, all right. What we'll do is we'll do an addendum, a modification to this loan. We'll move them off. But he goes, if you don't make your payment one time, I'll never lend anything to you ever again. So I was like, all right, I'm on the hook. Let's do this. And so that ultimately worked out, working that deal out with the bank and then also working out with those two individuals to be able to acquire that. And looking at that, those buildings were tremendously undervalued. I mean, day one, I kicked the rents up $100 a unit.
Okay.
And so back then, that was a huge jump.
Yeah.
Automatically.
You lose a lot of turnover.
Yeah, and they had about 30% of them were vacant. So we went in, paint, flooring, and really just kind of cleaned it up, just try to get them full, get cash flow going in. And then what we decided to do from that point on, once we got them up, fully leased, cash flow coming in, then we took one unit as tenants leaved, took one unit at a time and started updating them.
I see, yeah.
And so then from there, I was able to kick it up another $50. So here, as these units are going, the cash flow started increasing to kind of fast forward a little bit, at year 7, I was able to pay off First Federal and pay off the owners early. I just went ahead and gave them 3 checks to make up, year 7, 8, 9, 10. Just be able to be done with it. And so that really, from that point on, just really accelerated me buying it. And looking back at it, I bought them for roughly about $20,000 a door.
Okay.
Now. So
wow.
It's a complete steal, but it took some creativity to make that deal work and to be able to do it.
But that sets you up so much more for being able to leverage that against other properties or gaining more assets and so forth.
Correct. And that's why, I'm saying start out slow and the next thing you know, it just shoots up like a rocket. I've used that analogy other times. And, you
weren't married yet then when you did that, were you?
No, I was not married. And I had a lot of time.
Exactly. Trying to tell a spouse, like, I'm going to do this. No, that's why. Yeah, but doing it at that age, that's awesome. So 0 to 24, 26 units pretty much right out of the gate.
Yeah, overnight. And then from there, I just kind of kept going. So I started from there seeing the single-family homes that these banks were wanting to get rid of at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was going and picking these things up for $20,000, $30,000 and renting them for $500-$600.
Okay.
So I identified 2 agents that banks were, so they would go to the courthouse steps, the banks would buy them back to be able to sell them and be able to write the losses off. So I identified 2 agents here in town that were getting them, and I said, hey, just before you list these things, will you technically, give me a heads up?
Yeah.
And so they said they couldn't do it, but one of the agents hinted that before she put them on LBAR or anything, she put them on her personal website.
Really?
So I was checking that website out 2 or 3 times a day, and I would just call her and say, I'll take it. And it worked out good for her because she would be the agent on both sides.
Yeah.
So her commission would be better. And
again, another part of the relationship of like the brokers that are in that space as well as the bankers. And if you've got those 2, you can piece the other parts together, contractors and stuff like that, but it all starts right there. Yeah, and that's the importance of having relationships. And commercial real estate is all relationships. Without relationships, you can't go anywhere. What's your current portfolio look like now? So my current portfolio is roughly 100 units, anywhere between 4plexes, duplexes, single-family homes, and then on the commercial side, I have 150,000 square feet consisting of 32 commercial tenants. Okay. Is that one property? No. So the commercial side's roughly, probably about 15 different properties scattered throughout Lexington, and then we have one down in Florida. Yep, and we were talking a little bit off that off air about insurance in Florida. Yeah, that's another beast in itself. That was I think the insurance agent after that. No, we don't talk about Florida. That's the way we put it. Florida stays in Florida, and we don't talk about it unless you're in Florida. That's true. With insurance. Anything? I know the other thing as far as insurance goes, you were mentioning how you wanted to speak a little bit to the builder's risk side of things, as far as the importance of that on the commercial side of things, or brokers like myself. Yeah. I think that's for anybody listening to your audience needs to. So if you're remodeling a property or building anything, and this could be on the commercial side or the residential side, a builder's risk policy is definitely a benefit. So I've done several developments around town, and we, things get stolen. Yes, especially now. And we had a drywall truck back into one of our buildings, and it was a mess because they were a subcontractor of the supplier we were buying it from, and then the truck was owned by somebody else. The owner of and then the driver was an independent contractor. It was a mess. Oh my gosh! And so that was so nice to have that builder's risk policy set in place, where we just simply called it the insurance company and said, "Hey, this is." Truck just ran through the building the exterior just got complete. Yeah. And they took it from there. And then also, right now it is tough to get supplies. So if something gets stolen, that just messes up your project. Yeah. So it's nice to be able to have something that will take that risk away from you, and you're just not having to come out of pocket. Right. So that's what a builder's risk policy is designed. It's basically a policy. Then there's a builder's risk aspect that we put on top of it typically, where it's going to protect the building as it's being either created from the ground up or modified, but it's also protecting against the theft of the material. So material sitting on site, but it's not installed on the building yet. It's covered material that's not yet installed on the property, as well as what has been installed on it. For example, for any client where they're building a new house, they came in running all electric, and the front door hadn't gotten locked, and somebody came in and then cut out all the brand new electric copper just to get what I don't even know. Seems like a lot of work for not much money for that amount of copper, but they came in, cut all the wire out of brand new, type of thing, and so that was another part of the builder's risk side of things in there. It had been installed, but wasn't kind of complete yet. So, yeah. Switching gears here real quick, as far as some of your personal stuff, what are some of your personal goals this year, 2022?
So I'm going to lead into another question that we might get into later. So in December of 2020, I ended up going out to a piece of property. We had a hot water tank, that 80-gallon hot water tank got put into a commercial building, and the tenant called our office and said, hey, it's not working. So I couldn't get a hold of the plumber. So I was like, I'll go over there and see what's going on, see if it's something I can take care of. And so while I was over there, there was a piece of ductwork that came loose, and I said, well, I'll just fix it real quick. So I took a knife out, and of course the heat got kicked on, so this ductwork expands when the heat gets kicked on. And I put my arm around there, and when I did, I took my knife out to cut the little zip tie off the piece of flex, and I cut my main artery.
What?
And yeah, so blood was shooting everywhere. It's just like the movies. And so I took my belt off, make a tourniquet, and, it really reminds me how kind of God goes before us. God, watches out for us. And one of our employees is I can't go for my cell phone, because if I do, I let the tourniquet loose.
Oh, my.
So I had to make my way out to try to find somebody that could call for help. And so it happens that one of our employees just happens to come out of another unit the same exact time that I am. And then another tenant also. And so they're calling 911, and next thing you know, I go out. And, to me, getting to see what, as Christians, we, through baptism, the first death is defeated through baptism. Sure. And seeing, you've always heard that, death is just a transition, and physically getting to see that is getting to testify of what eternity is, and that our hope is ultimately in Christ.
Sure.
And so kind of through living through that, and I end up sum it all up. I lost 40% of the blood in my body.
Oh my goodness.
And the surgeon called me the walking miracle. And so through that, I have really, besides our real estate business, one thing is sharing the gospel with our tenants, praying for them, just being able to show our faith. And COVID has given us a great time to do that. So I have a goal each year to be able to share the gospel with one of our tenants, or just somebody that happens to come by one of our properties, or even somebody come into our office. So that's one of my personal goals. And then my career goal that I am ultimately looking forward to, so that 30,000 square foot development. Mm-hmm. Hopefully the city will allow us to speed things up a little bit. Probably not, but our goal is to hopefully be able to, by midsummer, be pushing dirt, and then hopefully have the building under roofed by the end of the year. Yeah. So knock on wood, we're shooting.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I hope to be able to kind of implement some of those same meaningful relationships and impacts on hopefully our tenants, and in my venture now into multifamily and rental property as well. What's one of the favorite concerts that you attended?
So Jason Aldean and Journey. And Journey probably would have been...
Wait, were they together?
No.
I was going to say. No. I was like, that'd be a crazy mix of like fans, for that.
No, but it was good. So Jason Aldean, Journey probably would have been a little bit better, but it was like everybody was my parents' age there.
Right.
And so I was like the youngest guy looking around. I was like, it's a little weird.
Yeah. What's one of your favorite trips that you've taken or wanting to go on?
So favorite trip I've done is to St. Lucia. Me and my wife went there, and man, it was awesome. Yeah, just probably the best snorkeling I've ever done.
Really?
I've snorkeled in
Water's
Europe.
just like beautiful, like clear, almost
crystal clear. I mean, man, you could see down probably, I'd say, at least 100 feet, just straight down. The coral that was right there that you could swim right up against, and I've never seen just the huge conch shells just laying out. I mean, besides like, you
Right.
go in the little tourist stores and they're just like laid out all over the place.
Yeah,
But imagine swimming in the ocean and
man.
just seeing that. And it was very laid back atmosphere. So when I go to the beach or anything, I like to be able to put my cell phone in a drawer.
Yeah.
Because it's constantly going off.
I hear that. Last question, favorite thing about Kentucky or to do in Kentucky?
So my favorite thing is land between the lakes. Going to Murray, having both lakes right there.
Yeah.
I learned to wakeboard out there, and that was such a blast. You get out of class, you go hit the water, and and then all the trails and everything you can hike around there. And then I've been able to recently with my kids and some friends we graduated with. We meet up every May, and usually hit LBL for a day or two.
Nice.
So that's been fun, and we're looking forward to doing that in about a month.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to kind of speak to you, get some mentoring from you or something like that, they could find you on Facebook or something like that.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook or Waller Property MEGEMT, MEGEMT.com.
Perfect. Man, Clay, I appreciate you coming on the show today. Appreciate everybody listening. Make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth podcast. And thanks for listening. Appreciate it, Clay.
All right, thanks, man.
To learn more about this podcast, visit our page at keystothecommonwealth.com. To connect with Landry regarding insuring your investment portfolio, email Landry at novainsuranceGroup.com or call 859-687-2004.